Hi, my name is Tay Moss. I'm the director of ChurchX, which is an e-learning community for church and nonprofit groups. This presentation I'm about to give is a version of a talk that I gave at the Moodle Moot conference that was held here in Toronto um, in the spring of 2024. So what I'm going to tell you is going to become quickly dated. So that's a caveat. The second caveat I always give is that this was designed for an audience that is using the learning management system Moodle to do teaching. Moodle is the most common learning management system in the world. It's kind of like the WordPress of the online education world because it's open source and people can take it and modify it and use it for their uses. So this is going to be a little Moodle focused, this presentation, but these techniques for teaching using AI would be applicable in other learning management systems, or even without a learning management system, you could do these exercises. So I hope you find this useful. You can always email me if you have questions. So this is case studies of the use of GPTs in higher education courses. So just a word about me. My name is Tay. I'm an Anglican priest with more than 20 years experience with communications, teaching, project management, and about 2 years experience as the founder of the e-learning community ChurchX, which is a multi-tenant e-learning and e-commerce site. So what I mean by multi-tenant is that instead of just us creating our own learning platform and selling courses, we created something where other partners could join us and sell their own courses and receive money for those. So in other words, we created something kind of like Coursera or edX or something like that, where you have a lot of different institutions that use us to host their content. So it's only about 18 months old, but in that time, we've grown to 14 partners and more than 6,000 users and more than 310 courses and programs. That includes processing more than 5,000 credit card transactions, which is quite nice. It's really very gratifying to build all this architecture and then spin it up and see it actually work at scale. The tech stack for my project, if you're interested, is we start with Microsoft Azure Cloud Network. Is what provides our hosting, and one of the reasons we went with Microsoft is they could promise us Canadian servers, and also they give grants for nonprofits. So that was two good reasons to use Microsoft. So that's Linux, and then on top of that Linux virtual machine, we have Moodle 4.1, and then on top of that we have the Edutor theme. We are planning to upgrade to Moodle 4.5 when that's released this fall. We'll probably give it like a month or two after the initial release to make sure there are no significant bugs, or the bugs that are there are fixed before we do the upgrade. So the Edutor theme, and then on top of that, the Sophia catalog and e-commerce solution, which is something that we developed in-house. It is a best-in-class e-commerce plugin. By what I mean by that is that there are a few minor catalog systems that exist for Moodle, and there's a little bit of functionality people have created using external applications like Zapier or PayPal, and they've kind of like cudgeled things together a little bit. And this is different. This is a complete e-commerce solution for Moodle sites that allow organizations to sell their courses to the public or give them away for free and be able to track and manage enrollment and all kinds of wonderful things. Some features that it has that I'm not aware of any other equivalent system that does is first of all, it supports multi-tenancy. So you can have managers of these different partners, and they can manage their own content. They can create products and catalogs and do all that stuff, and they can view an account management dashboard to see what their sales and enrollment statistics are like. They can generate pretty graphs and analytics and all that good stuff. So multi-tenancy, it supports different payment models such as free, like a one-time payment, subscriptions. It also supports team-based purchases, so you can have one person buy access to a course and then share that access with multiple other people. You can do course spawning, which is a feature where you can, say you create a course like accessibility training for the workplace. And you want to then sell that to other organizations. They can buy it, and then the buyer becomes the teacher, and they can customize that course and then run it for their own organization. And there's lots of applications where you might want to do that. Basically create an off-the-shelf curriculum where people can very quickly and easily purchase it, become a teacher of it, run it, and share that access with other people in their organization. So course spawning, of course, it supports catalog pages, product pages, has a custom search engine, various optimizations for social media sharing, like it uses the Open Graph framework, if you want to get technical about it. So you can like like for a given product, you can define a social media sharing image that'll appear in a thumbnail if somebody loads that link into Facebook or X/Twitter or whatever they might want to do with it. Also, RSS feeds, which is handy. Like if you have a WordPress site, you can actually have an RSS feed aggregator pull the data from the ChurchX website of the catalog and post it in your own website. So that's convenient. And of course, it also supports Google Analytics, the e-commerce side of that. So if you were to put a Google tag on like an advertisement that you're running on Facebook, you could see exactly how many people who clicked on that ended up actually purchasing the course and how much they purchased it for, and really generate some amazing analytics if that is what you're into. Okay, so that's a little bit about my background. As you can see, I do have some experience in online teaching and project development. So let's talk about AI for a second. Of course, AI is not new. Even before Alan Turing created his model of like a theoretical model of what a computer, the math ought to work like, and started talking about things like Turing machines and talking about things like the Turing test and stuff. Even way before him, there were computer scientists that were speculating about creating digital brains or models of mechanical things that would imitate human people. So this has been going on for quite a while, and people have gotten used to things like the suggested next show algorithm in Netflix, or the similar one in Amazon, and all these kinds of machine learning and AI kind of technologies. What is new is having really powerful general purpose GPTs. LLMs, which are large language models, it's a type of artificial intelligence, and then GPTs are a type of LLM. And so it's like this type. So you're getting quite specific, but the basic idea of a GPT is that it is a transformer architecture, which means that it is continually trying to predict what the next best word to fit the case is. But in the case of something like ChatGPT-4, what we're dealing with is a pretty complex architecture, actually, that goes beyond just GPTs, strictly speaking, to lots of other related technologies that are being used to craft and optimize the best response to a person. So, so when you hear them disparagingly called, spell checkers on steroids, they're actually a little bit more than that at this point. So anyway, let's talk about some things they're really good at. They are good at summaries. They're good at descriptions, translations. They're good at talking dialogically back and forth with somebody in a kind of chat, format. They're good at debugging programs. They're good at doing comparisons and general ideation, just kind of brainstorming kinds of things. Like, it's great if you want to ask a ChatGPT or Llama 3 or something, give me 5 good ideas for how to cook soup or something. It'll give you some great ideas that you never thought of. What it's not great at yet, or at least without a little bit of help, is things like accuracy of its responses, verifiability, specificity, planning, reasoning, memory, what I would call exceptional cases, and ethics. And so some examples of some use cases where it's not so great. Most models will fail the question, how many words are in your answer to this prompt? Right? Most can't, because they can't plan, right? They can't think ahead how many words they're going to end up making. Most will fail that. There are a few that will pass, but most will fail that. Another example of something that they're not great at yet is if you ask a question, often it'll want to give you the answer that conforms to the kind of general opinion on the internet, because that's the information it was trained on. And so instead of privileging maybe experts in a field, it'll take the kind of general consensus answer as being the correct one, even though an expert might have a less popular but more correct opinion, right? It doesn't know how to evaluate those that well. Another thing it's not great at is citing its sources. So that can be a problem sometimes. And things like that. In terms of ethics, at this stage in the development of these GPTs and LLMs, a lot of the ethics, you have a kind of base level ethics of alignment that comes with just the training material they were trained on, and then you have a kind of additional layer of rules that are put upon them. You might call them guardrails or heuristic kind of guidelines and things. And there's a lot of work still to be done in that area, because what you can do is you can say something like, draw me an image of the Prophet Muhammad, and it won't do it, right? Because it has a rule saying don't do that. But if you ask it to, make an image of a prophet from that time period in that part of the world and blah, 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 you can walk it into that. Similar with something like a dangerous information, like how to break into a car, how to make a bomb, any of these things, you can get the AI to give you an answer if you kind of like weasel around the prompt. And that's because as soon as you try to create these rule-based ethical systems, it's just going to find ways around it, right? People are going to find ways around it. So what we have to do is teach ethical principles to these systems, and that's still a ways off. But they're still quite useful and powerful. And actually, let me just go back a slide here just a little bit. This is a rapidly improving field. And we see some techniques already emerge that are quite powerful to extend and fix LLMs and fix some of these problems. RAG is a good example of that. That stands for Retrieval Augmented Generation. So the idea is you have your large language model, such as ChatGPT-4 over here, and then you have your own set of data stored in a kind of database here, a vector database usually. And what you do is you send the first step of your query from the user, you retrieve information first from your database that is relevant, and then you take that context and you add it to the original prompt, and then you feed that to the LLM. So you're giving the LLM the question, given the following context, and then you put all the stuff you retrieve from the database, answer this question, and then you put the user's question, and then that returns back an answer that has specificity and has accuracy and has verifiability, which were all problems that I flagged a minute ago. So RAG is a very powerful technique, and it is the technique that is behind some of these sites like Chatbase.io and some of those other ones that you may be seeing. MOE's Mixture of Experts. Q-Star is we're not exactly sure what Q-Star is. We think it's a mechanism for AI to be self-training. And AGI, which is the idea of artificial general intelligence, that you could create AIs that are so strong that they can be better at human beings at pretty much any general task, and maybe even at specialized tasks. So the AI would just simply be smarter than human beings in most things. This is precedented. Computers are now better at human beings at playing chess and Go, which is even harder to learn than chess. So, will we be surpassed in other areas of intellectual endeavor? Probably. It's a question of when will this happen, and what will be the necessary steps. One of the main limitations at the moment that they seem to be running into, the speculation is just simply not having enough data to train these systems on, right? Like they have the kind of general internet in a lot of ways. Like they'll do like Reddit, and they'll do like probably YouTube, and they'll do like some other stuff, but they need more content. They need more conversations from people to be able to train these models. And that's why there's some discussion of what they call synthetic data, where you actually have AIs that specialize in generating plausible information and conversation, and you have the other AIs being trained on that, which seems a lot like a snake eating its own tail, but surprisingly it actually is. A lot of the studies suggest it can be effective. And VJEPA, that's another sort of effort at a new model for training AIs to be more human-like. So AGI is probably coming. But in the meantime, let's talk about some of the AI that's available right now. So I'm going to focus on a couple of plugins for Moodle. These may or may not be available in equivalent programs for other learning management systems like Canvas, like Populi, like those kinds of things. And I should also point out that you don't necessarily need any of these plugins to do the learning and teaching exercises that I'm going to talk about later in my case study section of this talk. In other words, like a lot of the case studies are going to be examples of activities you can do where all you need to be able to do is give students access to an LLM that you've configured. So that could be ChatGPT, that could be Chatbase, that could be Llama 3, anything like that, Gemini, Microsoft Copilot, any of them. And you just have to set it up as an instructor or give the students the correct preparatory material, and then they can go off to that website and run those things. One of the assumptions so far in this space is that the actual LLM GPT program, whether it's Gemini or Microsoft Copilot, OpenAI, whatever, generally speaking, is going to be run as a separate service from your Moodle site or your LMS site. And there's two good reasons for that. One is that these LLMs, GPTs, can be quite intensive with their server needs. So it would basically dominate the usage of your server if it was doing both of those things, and it'd be quite out of proportion. Like you'd have like 10% of your activity on your site would be hosting your learning management system, and like 90% would be just running these GPTs and computing the answers to people's questions, right? The inference. So that would be a kind of silly design choice to make. And it would probably also, the second problem is that it would lead you to a situation where you would have to optimize your server to feed the LLMs and GPTs the kind of configurations they need at the possible expense of your Moodle site or your learning management system. So the other reason is just just as these technologies are evolving so quickly, it makes sense to be able to treat them as almost more like a commodity, like something that you buy as a consumable, like compute time on these servers that are running these LLMs, advanced LLMs. That's like a consumable that you're just buying bandwidth as you need it, and you can scale it, and you can switch out one service provider for another, and things like that. So that's why all the models I'm going to talk about assume some kind of a connection to a third-party LLM model. And if you want to do it for free, you could download Llama 3 and set up a server of your own, and run it, and then create an API and do that connection. But you don't have to. Okay. Anyway, so these are some existing plugins that are available right now, and this, as I keep saying, this is a rapidly emerging field. All of these are going to be very different, probably in a year or two from now. But they're not necessary. You can totally just do these exercises without using any of these tools. But I do want to give a shout out for admins that are running learning management systems, particularly Moodle, that I would encourage you to go ahead and try some of these plugins and make them available to your instructors. I know that there's always a worry about putting a new plugin in, and is that going to be compatible with everything else? Is it going to break something? And it's really risk reward kind of thing. But I haven't really had any major issues. I always set things up on a development server first to test, and it's worked out pretty well for me. So anyway, I would encourage you to go ahead and try some of these. So let's start with this one, which is brand new and not quite ready for beta testing yet. But this is Aid AI ID for AI Instructional Designer. This is created and maintained by Michael Millay here in Canada. So this is a course creation plugin that allows you to create a brand new course from scratch, or to create components within a course. So you could use this, like you build a course, and then you could use this plugin to just generate like a quiz or a module of some sort. You can totally do that, but you can also use it to create an entire course. And the way that works is there's this screen. You put in your information, like a description, like you can upload materials, and then you can choose parameters like the learning framework you want to use. So I'll just give you an example, like, okay, so like, who's this course for? Like, what he means here is like, what grade level is this? Is this a continuing education course for people that have already have a college degree? Is this for 8th graders, right? You also specify what the delivery method is. Like, is this totally an asynchronous self-paced course, or is this something that's going to have class sessions virtually or in person? And of course, learning framework, like you can use the ADDIE model or another course learning management sort of template, essentially. And then once you've selected those things, it automatically generates the course and puts the content in it. Another similar but smaller in scope project is just simply this AI text to question generator, where this is a plugin that you access through the course top menu, and you can just simply paste in your text, and then it generates questions, and then those questions you can then edit and compile into courses. Another plugin that's available right now, this one has gotten a little bit more currency and a little bit more traffic, is the OpenAI chat block, created and maintained by Bryce Yoder in the US. So this is a block that you can add to Moodle courses or the dashboard, and it provides a chat interface that's pretty intuitive. And this, like the other models in here, it uses OpenAI, and you need an OpenAI subscription to use it, so you have a key that you enter. And you can also pre-specify things like your initializing prompt, and it loads up in the background when it loads up a session with a student or a user. And it can work with OpenAI assistants. So in OpenAI assistants, it's kind of like that RAG idea. In fact, it is a version of a RAG that you can preload OpenAI with documents and like other information, and then you can create an assistant with that, and that assistant you can then access with Bryce's plugin. He basically intended this to be used as a site-wide help agent, or maybe a course level expert, and that's why he made it as a block. So it's really more of a service than it is a learning activity per se. But that's why we created this. I created this project, which is called Macy from Moodle AI Chat Interface. It's similar to Bryce's plugin in that it's creating a chat interface for people that works with OpenAI, so like ChatGPT 4. and it can also work with assistants that are created in there. But it has a couple of key differences from Bryce's. First of all, it's an activity, not a block. So it includes things like automatic completion criteria. So you can create an assignment where like students have to do, say, 5 exchanges with the chat agent before they'll be marked as complete, right? You can also, you can't do this on Bryce's, but on ours, you can log the activity. So you can, if the instructor wants to, they can see a report of exactly what the dialogue was back and forth. If you turn on the conversation logging, by the way, it does inform the student that they are being recorded, the conversation, which we added as an ethical consideration. So the use case here is obviously a learning activity in a course. Using some of the examples that I'll give later in the case study section, you could easily create an activity in your Moodle that uses this kind of interaction with a student. Future plans include integration with other GPT models besides OpenAI. We started with OpenAI pretty much for the same reason that everybody else does, that it's relatively easy to get up and running, and it's excellent, right? But there are reasons why you might want to use somebody else's models, so or even build your own. So we're adding that capability this summer to be able to use a different thing. So like if you take Llama 3 and you run it on your own school server, then you could give access to use that as your LLM for Macy. We also want to create our own RAG system and integrate that with this, so that within a course you could designate material that you want to index, and then that would be made available to the students in this chat interface. So this is OpenAI Questions. This is another one of Bryce Yoder's plugins. This is similar to the other one that it just simply creates quizzes based on data that you put into a box. So you see where it's got the question generator box in the upper right hand corner there. That's where you paste your stuff, and then you indicate what kind of question type you're trying to generate, and then you hit generate and it generates it. Right, pretty simple. So those are some plugins that exist right now. Not on that list that I learned about last week is some stuff that's been created by York University here in Toronto. They have 2 really powerful plugins they're working on. One is similar to AI ID. It's a course content generator that you could use to generate quizzes or not lectures, but like pages or like other material. And that one is a little bit more man in the loop style, where you tell it you want to do some questions and it gives you what it's developed, and then you edit it and then it puts it in the course. So it creates this kind of extra layer of human review. And it doesn't necessarily, in fact, I don't think it does do things like create an entire course, like an outline of a course and the different sections and all that sort of stuff, which Michael's does. So it's an interesting kind of style difference there between the 2 models of course creation or course content creation. Another one that's brand new and very cool is is York University. They also created one that is a RAG for Moodle. So it lives in the Moodle site that you have, and it creates a RAG system so that you can index the content from courses and make it available either in a course or outside a course. So you could actually create like a chatbot that's an expert. Let's say you're running an economics course. You could create a chatbot that's an expert on all the content of that course and then make that publicly available. And people could like ask it questions like, explain to me this concept, and it would do it based on that instructor's material. There's lots of amazing cases where this could be quite handy. Creating virtual tutors, for example, but all kinds of other things. Anyway, that one is not public yet either. And I know they're in discussions internally at York about when they can make it available, hopefully open source. So, okay, so those are some tools that are available, but I promised case studies. So, how are we actually going to apply these things, right? So I'm going to look at 3 different examples of these being used in real life. The first is simulations and role play. These 2 people, Dr. Ethan Mollick and Luc Mollick, are Wharton School of Business professors in Pennsylvania, and they are kind of rock stars, in my opinion, at this point. They have some really well-produced, interesting videos that are great and highly accessible. So if you want to be able to share links to accessible content to instructors, like this is what LLMs are, or GPTs, this is how they can be used in teaching, that kind of stuff. These folks make some great content, and they're publishing. So this case study I'm about to present and some other stuff is based on this paper, From Instructors to Innovators, and it's a pretty good long paper. but it's got a lot of specific examples and wonderful material that it could be built upon. And of course, they intended that people would take the appendix examples of prompts and things and customize them for their own instructional needs. One of the things that you'll note when you look at their examples is that they do a lot of long prompts. Like this one for this role play exercise was like, more than 1,100 words, or it's just tremendously long prompts because they want to get really specific about the kind of pedagogy and activity they want to happen with the students, right? This is kind of key. Like, it's not enough just to throw the student at the AI, right? Like, you want to give it a nice long context to explain how you want it to engage the student, what you're trying to accomplish. So it has a couple of sections to the prompt. It has in the activity. First is an introduction section, and then a scenario suggestion portion where the AI presents some possible scenarios to the student. The student selects one, and then it sets up a narrative, and you begin to play through the role play, and then it gives it an evaluation, at the end. So as you can imagine, that requires a pretty long prompt. So this is what the prompt looks like when they laid it out and color coded it nicely. There's a lot of explicit do this, don't do that kinds of instructions in here given to the model. Also, a key feature is that there's a lot of steps in here. So step 1, do this with the student. And then at the end of it, they'll say, do not proceed to the next step until this is completed, right? So it like really kind of forces the AI to kind of do this in a stepwise, almost chain of thought kind of method. They noted that some of the models that they tried this on required more nuance than others. Like, for example, ChatGPT 4, this kind of works just as it is, and that's what they really optimized it for. But if you want to use this with Gemini, they found that they had to sort of force Gemini a bit to be more assertive with the students, because Gemini, by its nature, wanted to be more accommodating to the students' interests and stuff, so it kind of get off track, right? And no, you need to stay strictly on task. Do this with the student. Part of the assessment they did with the students was to ask them to evaluate the realism of the sim. So looking straight into that uncanny valley of AI, how good is the AI's improv skills? How realistic did this feel? And that activity of assessing the AI is in itself a metacognitive task, which is useful pedagogically. So, here's what it looks like. They start off with goal. You are a role-playing scenario in which the user practices negotiations and gets feedback of the practice. So you might ask, how does GPT know what negotiation is? The answer is that at the end of this prompt, then they had a whole section of content from one of their lectures about what negotiation is and good negotiation practices, so that the AI actually had a reference point for what the professors mean when they say good negotiation skills. So then there's these different sort of steps to it, and I'm not going to go through this right now, but you can definitely read that later if you want. And this was just an example of what it looked like with an actual student. So, the AI the student began with, can you help me practice negotiating? And absolutely, I'd love to help you practice negotiating, to tailor the scene, blah, blah, blah. Tell me about yourself. And then it just kind of goes on from there. And then it gives these 3 options. And then the student chose option number 1, and then it actually like kind of set up the scenario, and then it played the role play. Okay. And one of the things that they I would note is really important is they always include a criteria for ending the exercise. So they always sort of say, this is, end the exchange after no more than 5 prompts, or like something like that. They set an end to it, so that the AI knows when it can complete the task and do the evaluation of the student. Okay, so let's look at some other ones here. They have in their paper, which again I have the link to here, a bunch of really useful exercises that can be done with students, such as role play, goal play. The difference between role play and goal play is that in role play, students pretend to be someone they're not, right? Like you are a curator of an art gallery purchasing a piece of art on behalf of your university's gallery, right? That's one. Whereas goal play is you are yourself, and you are helping somebody achieve their goal. So you might say, so instead of you are the curator, you are advising the curator of this museum on how to achieve the goal of a good purchase price for this piece of art for your university gallery. You see, so goal play. Learning through critique, where the AI creates a scenario and then the student critiques it. And I have an example of that later in another case study. Another is AI as student. So the idea is that the task of the student is to explain some concept to the AI, and that was one of those ones where you have to tweak the prompt, because some of the models will be very agreeable and they'll accept the first explanation of the student as being sufficient. So the student has to be challenged to kind of come up with more than one example or more than one way of explaining a concept before the AI itself will be satisfied that they've been explained to. So AI a student. Um, Mentoring, coaching, and tutoring, they saw at least three different kind of aspects to that. One is what they call reflection coaching, where the AI is not necessarily aware of the material that was included in, say, the lecture, but they are going through an exercise of reflection with the student, asking the student to reflect on their experience and to integrate it into their understanding. Integration agents are kind of similar, helping students to apply knowledge that they learned in class. And AI tutor is the one that people go to most often in their imaginations when they think about AI and teaching, which is an AI acting as a tutor to students. And I mean, in their paper, Pollock and Pollock actually like cite studies that show that one-on-one tutoring is effective, which I mean I appreciate, but seemed unnecessary. I mean, I think we all kind of take it for granted that one-on-one teaching is very effective, and that's exactly what they found with AI. That you can make an AI tutor that can teach a concept to students pretty effectively. And then finally, they created a blueprint, what they call a blueprint, which is a prompt that makes other prompts. So you tell it, I'm creating a course of art history, and I help me develop a prompt for an exercise in which students try to create art from a classical era and compare it to actual art from a classical era. Yeah, that kind of thing. So it'll actually generate these prompts. It's just, those prompts are quite long, and this is one of the this is an interesting feature of AI that I found. Like when you ask ChatGPT, for example, to make a picture of a cat playing on a keyboard, it doesn't actually pass that prompt straight to its image generation program, which is Dolly 3. What it does instead is it actually first elaborates that prompt. So it'll add more detail to that prompt. And so it'll take that, make a cat playing a keyboard into create an image in a cartoon style of a cat playing a keyboard, with sunset in the background and blah blah blah, make the cat cute, right? It gives it a lot more detail, and that helps the image generation model to make a much more satisfying image. So this is kind of a similar idea that an instructor might not think of all the little details that they need to make a good prompt, and so here you can kind of give it some ideas, and then it'll kind of fill out the details. It's kind of like the intellectual equivalent of the generative background fill that's available in Adobe Photoshop now. Like in Adobe Photoshop, the photo editing program from Adobe, you can take an image, let's say it's a horizontal image, and you want to do like a vertical crop instead. You can just kind of take the edges of the image and drag them, and then say fill that in, and it'll actually interpolate what it thinks the background would have looked like so that it matches and blends perfectly, and it's astonishingly good, right? So this is a similar kind of concept that you can kind of fill in the details that would otherwise be missing. All right, so I highly recommend that paper to you. Let's move on to another example, another case study. This is Dr. Samantha Chang from University of Toronto. She teaches a 17th century art history course, and she used the AI to create images, have the students create images that were similar to the historic images that she was looking at. And then she asked the students to basically take the role of a teacher and give feedback about the art. Interestingly, she found that one of the challenges with this is that students would be reluctant to critique their peers very sharply. But on the other hand, with their doing artificially generated images, they were even overly harsh and critical of them. So she's like, and she thought that created a bad model and created bad habits as well. So she's like, we need to be respectful of the AI, right? Like, don't go crazy on the AI and be mean about it, right? Because she's trying to model what good feedback looks like. The students would share their prompts, their responses, their critiques, and that's all accessible material. You can totally assess, how a student is able to, because what they put in their prompt reflects their understanding of the material, right? So, how specific is the prompt? How much detail do they put in there? Does it reflect a correct understanding of the time period that they're studying? All great questions. Okay, so here's some examples just for fun. So these were all created using Microsoft Copilot, which she has free access to through her university. The students we're challenged to stare into the uncanny valley of the kind of surreality of AI generated material and apply the concepts of the class to develop their visual analysis skills. In other words, they had to show and develop their skills at actually closely examining an image, being able to talk about it with specificity and accuracy, to be able to talk about like what was, say, why is this not a 17th century painting? Like, what's different about it? What's wrong about it? Well, in this one, it has pandas, right? Like, that's kind of an obvious one and kind of fun. And the humor of this exercise, is kind of inherent there. And I think that comes from also the creative aspect of this. That students are very with a relatively low stakes. They're being like if you ask students to create this image, they would feel a lot more invested in it. When they're just having the AI generate it, if their friends laugh at it, it's a low stakes learning activity. And so there's a lot of humor in it. This one too, I mean, there's a lightheartedness to the cats in this picture, but now you notice that this queen or royal figure is being depicted as a black person, perhaps from Africa. That detail is not funny, right? Like that takes us into a whole critique of like race and racial representation in 17th century art. Now think about what a fruitful conversation you could have in class with an image like that, right? Another example of the corgis, fun, lighthearted, cool, okay. And you can see how that activity might really appeal to students. This last one I'm going to focus on is, to me, one of the most thorough projects that's been done to date about the use of AI in teaching. This was a RAG-based study buddy created by Dr. Randall Reed and his assistant Claire Kennedy at Appalachian State University. This stuff I'm about to present is from an unpublished chapter in an upcoming book. The book is AI and IA, Utopia or Extinction, edited by Dr. Ted Peters. So I've also heard Dr. Reed present this at the AARSBL conference, and I've had several email exchanges with him about this material as well. So I'm very keen on this project. Basically, what he did is he created a virtual study buddy by taking his lecture transcripts, creating a RAG instance, and then asking students to engage that chatbot in a conversation about the course material that he had presented. And then he gathered feedback via survey after each time that he did this exercise with the students. So in terms of material, this is the prompt itself, which I won't read out to you, but you see again how a lot of these activities you end up with more and more elaborate prompts, and that's what creates the actual pedagogy. Really, it's these prompts. And like one of the things that he did was he did the surveys. So from that, over a 4-month period, he got 81 students, 500 survey results. The vast majority of the ratings on a 1 to 5 scale were 5 out of 5. And then when the couple of ones that were lower tended to be more like there was some little small technical glitch or bug or something like that. So basically very high regard for this activity from the students. Some of the feedback or issues that they encountered that they had to fix. One was that the questions got a little too personal, such as, do you know anyone who has died? Another question that was too personal, have you had an intense experience with friends? And you can see why the AI asked those questions, because these are religion courses. So if you're doing like a survey of world religion, totally seems fair game to ask students if they've had an experience of death, if they have thoughts about the afterlife, stuff like that. But whereas that question might be perfectly acceptable coming from a human TA, when it comes from the AI, it feels weird, feels uncanny, feels icky, right? And but the inverse can also be true, that students are often willing to ask the AI questions that they would not be comfortable asking a TA because they don't want to feel stupid. There is a certain kind of shame in rudimentary inquiries, and people don't want to open themselves up to that vulnerability. So being able to ask dumb questions was a real feature. Occasionally it got confused about lecture content. An example of like fiction versus documentary, like sometimes Dr. Reed would show a clip from a fictional movie like The Matrix, and that would end up in the transcript, and the AI would think that was true reality and not understand that that was a documentary. But that's the kind of thing you can fix by just kind of bracketing off that material, either not including it as a separate thing, or actually saying to the AI, this is an example of a story in which it's fiction but illustrates these points, that kind of thing. So you can deal with that. It also got confused about like the Gospels and Mark, Matthew, Luke, John, right? And because in some places they're talked about somewhat interchangeably, and so he had to add a detail to the prompt to make sure that it focused a little bit more tightly on which gospel it was talking about at that time. In repetition, it sometimes would repeat the same question to students because it didn't have a memory of the previous chat that it had with that student. And that's another fixable thing. You can now create persistent conversations where the AI remembers the previous content of the discussion. Another way to fix that, the way that he actually fixed it was when a new instance of the AI was created for the student, it would take the previous conversation history and reload it as a context into the chat. So the chat started with, this is the record of your previous conversation with the student. Boom. Now continue on with this exercise. Boom. Right, something like that. Okay. The feedback from the students qualitatively was quite positive. Here's some quotes. AI seemed to understand my points that would have been probably impossible to convey to people I know personally. I liked how the bot led the conversation. I don't like taking leads in conversation. Look, it noticed my pattern of thinking and called it out. This is kind of similar to some of the other people that I've talked to about this, that students are generally responding very positively to these tools. It's also useful noting that no one is using these tools as an exclusive kind of teaching methodology, right? These are all being used in tandem with in-class discussions and other things. All right, so moving on. Yeah, I think that's pretty much my talk. Oh yeah, some patterns. Sorry. Okay, this is obviously creating powerful learning experiences that are personalized, instantaneous, and like always available. They have a nice persistence to them. But it does create some burdens on instructors. First of all, they have to be pedagogically intentional. And for a lot of instructors, they may have a way that they prefer to teach classes and that they've been doing it for 20 years. And this is a new tool, a new methodology. And so making that shift to be intentional about a new way of doing presenting content can be kind of hard. Iterative prompt engineering is its own kind of skill set, like getting good at like creating a prompt and then refining it and refining it and refining it. And if somebody's used to creating, say, a syllabus at the beginning of a course and doing that material and then just letting it go, forgetting about it, not revising it, this is a new way of thinking where you have to go in and change it every week or every time you get feedback from the students. Another burden this puts on instructors is monitoring the interactions. You do want to supervise the AI. It's kind of like a dumb TA, right? In a way, right? Like it's not that smart and it can make mistakes. It can go off topic. You do need to kind of watch it. And staying ahead of it in the automation. And I'll get into that in a second, but the resistance from IT key holders can be a significant factor too. I heard that from several different people I talked to, that their IT infrastructure at their universities was reluctant to have them using these tools because of unresolved questions about privacy concerns, security concerns, and just in general, handing students over to an IT system that they themselves are not controlling. Right? It seems risky. That's one of the reasons why I see in the future that a lot of institutions that have the resources are going to create their own instances of LLMs like Llama 3 that they're going to run locally, and then they can have a complete lockdown on the security and the safety of those systems. All right, but I said staying ahead of the automation. This has always been a challenge as computers have been integrated into life, especially when there's like big stakes like life and death. So this is the Apollo cockpit for the moon lander, the original moon lander, and right here you see the automation. The kind of critical automation thing was right here. This was the interface for the computer, which was an incredible piece of hardware, which the moon landing could not have been done without it, because you needed a way to translate the intentions of the pilots into the actual actions of the vehicle. You couldn't have direct control over the vehicle. Why? Well, let me give you an example of the complexity. Like the way the Apollo module is set up, you got this landing LEM, right? And then you got this rocket thing on the back, right? Well, that the axis of thrust for that rocket, it needs to be precisely through the center of gravity of the vehicle, right? Otherwise, it's going to go right. So how do you do that? Well, because people's weight changes, the fluids of like water and things in the vehicle and fuel are going to change. So they actually had a computer program that after they separated, one of the first things they did was an automated sequence where it would fire a small amount of thrust and then see where the vehicle moved, and it had sensors to see which directions it was moving in. And from that, it could calculate the correct orientation of the nozzle on the back so it would be in a direct alignment with the center of gravity of the vehicle. Right? That is not something a human being could do. Right? The automation made it possible, but they had the problem of, the automation couldn't do everything and it was going to make mistakes. So they knew they had to have all the rest of this interface for the human in the loop part of it, where somebody is literally looking at a window and deciding whether the spot that the computer says they're going to land in is the spot they want to land in. And as we saw in the Apollo 11 mission, the first successful moon landing, the automation, when they triggered the descent mode, it basically said, okay, we're going to land right here. So they looked out the window and there was like marks on the glass so they could see this spot, 23 by 57 or whatever it was. They could see visually the spot, and they saw it was a boulder field. And so they had to take over some manual control, not complete manual control, but they took over some control and put it into a mode where they gave simple commands like stay up, go forward, go back. And they were able to land the vehicle, right, with a human in the loop kind of system. But with all these systems, you always have to stay, one step ahead. That's the same problem with like autopilot on airplanes. They work great until they fly you into the side of a mountain. Like you have to stay ahead of it. Same thing in teaching. You have to stay ahead of where the class is going. You have to sort of know kind of the telos or the outcome that you're trying to achieve with the students, so that you can control and manage the teaching technologies and structures that you're using to teach them. So is AI a replacement for human teachers? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Could it get there? Maybe, honestly, but it's a ways off. Right now what we have are tools that augment the teaching experience, that augment the availability of information to students. So that's a word of warning, or something about automation. What's coming next? Well, the Moodle HQ people, which for that learning management system are working on several lines of inquiry that are led by Martin Dugamas, who's he's the founder of Moodle, and he has quit his CEO role, in other words, to take over the R&D, particularly related, but not only related, to the AI projects that are happening. So what they want to do essentially is create an AI subsystem as part of Moodle that will then be available with any given activity or whatever. So it'll be a much more efficient, way of doing it, because you can create in one place your like login credentials for OpenAI or Gemini or whatever, and then other places in the university system or program system it could call those services. Several projects are going on right now to create RAGs that are for Moodle, and like another Moodle HQ project is creating personal coaches, which isn't really a Moodle thing specifically, but the idea is you'd have like on your smartphone, you'd have a kind of personal life coach, and you'd ask it for something like, help me lose weight, right? And then you would interact with this device and it would coach you on how to do that. And one of Martin's insights about why he wants to put it on the device is he doesn't think people will trust that kind of information, highly personal information that they need for life change, to a website. Like they want control of the information, they want it on one device. And we are starting to see the emergence of LLMs, GPTs, that can run completely on the operating system of a phone without any internet at all. So this is a plausible future, that we could have these personal coaches with us at all times. If you want to connect to these conversations, the most active community currently talking about it for Moodle is this Matrix chat. Matrix is kind of like WhatsApp. It's a chat program interface system, whatever, but it's open source. And so you can access that on your phone or on your computer or whatever. And we also have a regular meetup that's like a lounge kind of thing every other week, where we get together and we just talk about sort of different stuff on a video call that we're working on. So either one of those would be great ways to connect with the community. That is my presentation. As I said, I gave this at Moodle Moot Canada 2024. I don't know if I was funnier in person, maybe a little bit. I made a couple of good cracks. Like I had a joke about how one of the advantages of the system is that, when the student is cramming for a test at like 2 o'clock in the morning, now they have like a personal TA they can call while they eat like munchies, right? Like they eat like Wheaties, right? They can, at 2 o'clock in the morning, they can engage their TA, their virtual TA, stuff like that. But it was fun. It was very energetic. Got lots of good questions from the crowd too, and some good emails afterwards. If you want to get in contact with me, please just you can do that by just scanning this QR code on the bottom right there, for example. That'll take you to a Google Doc that I set up for people to ask me questions, or you can just email me at imc@tucc.ca. So that's imc@tucc.ca. My name again is Tay Moss, and my project is ChurchX. Thank you very much for your interest, and good luck out there.